Clayface is here, folks. My most anticipated comic book film of the year. If you can believe it, we finally got our first look at it. It looks like everything I was hoping and wanting from this little, I don't know, I guess experiment, if you will, this sequel to Joker and the Penguin, finishing off the holy trinity of Batman villain adaptations. Anyways, this looks fantastic. After much anticipation, the first official teaser for Clayface is here. The trailer was shown last week during Warner Brothers' presentation at CinemaCon, and I've been eagerly awaiting its online debut ever since. 2026 is set to be a big year for James Gunn and Peter Safran's DCU. Following last year's success with Superman and Peacemaker Season 2, they're giving us 3 major releases this year with Supergirl, Lanterns, and of course, Clayface, the one that I think is going to be the best out of the 3 of them. Although, you know, Lanterns has a good chance of being great as well. Honestly, Supergirl is also looking to be really great. These are 3 projects that excite me a lot. But out of all the projects Gunn has announced for the new DC universe, I think Clayface is the most intriguing for a lot of people. Everyone expected the likes of Superman and Green Lantern to be fast-tracked, and of course, Gunn would want to continue the story of Christopher Smith and Team Peacemaker, but Clayface, that raised a lot of eyebrows when the project was first announced. Look, Batman has the biggest and best rogues gallery in comics, bar none, and if you think otherwise, I mean, you're kidding yourself. In recent projects like 2019's Joker and HBO's The Penguin have demonstrated that the Dark Knight's villains have the potential to be their own leading men. I know a lot of people didn't really care for Joker 2. I love Joker 2. I did a video defending Joker 2. You should go check that out. I think that movie is an interesting, weird little thing. Another experiment, if you will. I get why people didn't like it, but you know what? I liked it. But while audiences may have immediately got on board with a Two-Face movie or a Harley Quinn show, Clayface isn't exactly a name that was on everyone's mind. And that's kind of why I love this. When Gunn took over DC Films, my biggest hope wasn't just that he would revitalize the brand, pulling it out of the lull it's been stuck in for years, but that as both a studio executive and a filmmaker, he would allow DC to be a place for exciting voices to come in and tell unique, creator-driven stories with these beloved characters, and do something different to the studio-mandated conveyor belt movies that Marvel, for example, has oftentimes been guilty of releasing. Contrary to popular opinion, I thought the Lanterns' first trailer was an excellent showcase of that. While it split some fans' opinions, you can't say it doesn't look distinct and that it wasn't built from the ground up by its writers and directors. It doesn't feel like Superman, Peacemaker, or Creature Commandos for that matter, and that's a good thing. And judging from our first look at Clayface, this movie is leaning heavily into that, with James Watkins' film being a straight-up body horror movie that has the potential to be one of the freshest and most intriguing superhero adaptations in years, and a perfect encapsulation of DC's mission to create a universe that feels exciting and inspired. But before we get into this trailer, let's set out some context for both the Clayface character and how this particular film came into existence. While not directing the movie, Clayface is the brainchild of Mike Flanagan, best known for The Haunting of Hill House, Dr. Sleep, Midnight Mass, and The Fall of the House of Usher. Over the past few years, he's established himself as one of the most exciting names in horror, creating countless memorable, distinct, and compelling projects in a variety of different formats and styles. Honestly, if I were a studio executive, Mike Flanagan is the kind of director I would want in my inner circle. In 2021, Flanagan began developing ideas for a live-action film based around Clayface, initially pitching the concept to then DC Films producer John Berg, but the studio reportedly wasn't interested in the project. However, following the success of Matt Reeves' The Batman and the spin-off Penguin show, DC began looking to develop more Batman-centric projects, either in film or television. As such, Flanagan again pitched this idea for a Clayface horror film to James Gunn and Peter Safran, and the project was formally announced in late 2024. Reports at the time stated the project would be a straight-up horror movie, showcasing the character's tragic origin and transformation into the monstrous villain, and would take inspiration from the Feet of Clay episodes of Batman the Animated Series. Speak No Evil James Watkins was confirmed to helm the film in early 2025, with Flanagan already having commitments to his upcoming reboot of The Exorcist. Would have been too many good things going on here if Flanagan was also at the director's helm. But you know what? Watkins is a great choice. You know, a solid guy. Drive and Obi-Wan Kenobi screenwriter Hossein Amini was brought on to revise Flanagan's script before principal photography began in August. From the set photos that leaked late last year, it definitely gave off a similar gritty, street-level vibe to The Batman, with images of Tom Rhys-Harris wearing blood-soaked bandages, showcasing the dark, psychological horror tone that Watkins and Flanagan sought to bring to the DCU. And judging from this first trailer, Yeah, dude, they nailed that tone. The minute-long teaser, only a minute long, mind you, and I'm over the moon stoked out of my mind for this thing, opens with Matt Hagen in a hospital. His eyes and skin are red, and his face is covered in bandages. The camera zooms in as he squirms in pain before cutting to several shots of him pre-accident, him on a red carpet, being a Hollywood heartthrob, as well as gruesome images of him being assaulted and tortured by what looks like some type of mob. As the haunting rendition of Do You Realize by The Flaming Lips plays, the shots of Hagen begin to distort and transform, with his face melting and his lips starting to get stuck together. We get quick glimpses of Naomi Ackie as Dr. Caitlin Bates, and Hagen turning his arm into hammers and shadow before the final shot sees him lying in a bathtub, emotionless and completely numb, completely wiping his face away. While this is only the first teaser, and very much a teaser designed to demonstrate the movie's tone and basic premise, more so than specific plot details, I do think it tells us a lot about the direction Clayface is going. Judging from this 60+ second clip, it's certainly not the version we were previously introduced in Creature Commandos voiced by Alan Tudyk. While he may become that depending on when this movie is set, this film appears to be a more stripped back, grounded character study focusing on the story of Matt Hagen, a promising A-list actor in his horrific descent from rising Hollywood star to revenge-fueled monster. Alongside the teaser, we also got the film's official synopsis, which describes it as an intense story that explores the loss of identity and humanity that ravages of toxic love and the dark side of scientific ambition. And in the same vein of Clayface, you don't need a shape-shifting actor to bring your ideas to life. All you need is story blocks. I know better than anyone how hard it can be to find video assets that look great, are easy to implement, and don't cost the equivalent of Avatar's box office return to license. So story blocks is a goddamn lifesaver. I've been using their service actually even before this sponsorship. It's something that has helped fill the gaps when I'm trying to convey ideas but don't necessarily have the assets at my disposal, don't necessarily have the footage, and can't just go out and shoot it. With their huge stock library of creative assets including footage, music, sound effects, and templates, Storyblocks allows you to add flair and style to your videos with ease so you can focus on telling your story in the strongest, cleanest way possible. Under one fixed fee, everything you download is fully pre-licensed and ready to use, so you can rest easy knowing that you don't have to compromise your creative vision in order to appease copyright systems, and your channel will be free of strikes and claims. Not only that, but all of their assets are 100% human-made, thanks to a wide array of artists and filmmakers contributing worldwide. And let me tell you, it is so nice to browse through truly inspiring and unique visuals that have been produced by real people in an age where AI is just kind of taking over and running amok. So you can really stand out in a crowded market by using legitimate stuff like this. So what are you waiting for? To start telling better stories with the tools I personally use, head to storyblocks.com/filmspeak. They're offering 15% off any annual plan for a limited time, and that discount is only available through my link. That's storyblocks.com/filmspeak, and a huge thank you to Storyblocks for sponsoring this video. Before I dive into my thoughts on this specifically and what this information can tell us about the film, I should probably provide some context on the various iterations of Clayface in DC Comics and which specific stories Watkins and co. are likely incorporating into this project. While there have been multiple versions of Clayface in the comics, Matt Hagen is the one adapted into the film. However, this origin will likely incorporate elements of Basil Karlo's backstory. Karlo was the original Clayface, created by Bill Finger and Bob Kane in June 1940. First appearing in Detective Comics number 40, he was depicted as a struggling B-list actor who, upon learning he's been recast from his most famous role, is driven insane and plots revenge against his former co-stars, donning the costume worn in his cinematic appearances as the villainous Clayface. This version of the character didn't have any superpowers or supernatural elements. He was just a guy who went mad and used movie makeup and costumes to impersonate people and commit crimes. In 1961, though, a new version of Clayface was introduced in Detective Comics number 298 in the form of, you guessed it, Matt Hagen. Hagen wasn't initially depicted as an actor, though. Instead, he was a treasure hunter who gained shape-shifting powers after exposure to a radioactive protoplasm. He was, however, the first iteration of this character to physically fully transform into the hulking monster we know today. And when the Carlo version was later reintroduced to comics, the visual look and premise of Hagen were kept for virtually every Clayface story. The point of all this is that while Basil Carlo and Matt Hagen are distinct characters, their stories have often been combined in both comics and animation, with the most notable example being Batman the Animated Series Feats of Clay. In a series full of incredible arcs, that is one of the ones that sticks out to me the most. And kind of proves that you can do Clayface as a standalone hero. Yeah, like, I think it works a little bit more interestingly if Batman is thrown into the mix, but a lot of that episode is without the presence of Batman, and it works pretty great. In Feet of Clay, Matt Hagen, voiced by Ron Perlman of all people, is introduced with a backstory more reminiscent of Basil Carlo's. He's a struggling actor who was disfigured in an accident and seeks help from Gotham's criminal underworld to fix his face. He's given an experimental drug by crime boss Rupert Daggett, only to be extorted and forced into aiding Daggett's criminal activities. After Hagen refuses to work for Daggett, he's kidnapped and tortured, force-fed the same experimental drug that briefly cured him, until he's transformed into the grotesque monster we know as Clayface. This two-part episode is arguably the most famous Clayface story. I mean, it was my introduction to Clayface as a character, and was truly one of the more haunting arcs throughout Batman the Animated Series, and one that stuck with me over the years. It's no surprise that this episode was Mike Flanagan's inspiration when pitching the Clayface film, and will likely form the basis of Watkins' upcoming film. It's also worth mentioning that the animated backstory was also retconned into the comics, with DC's Rebirth relaunch in 2016, establishing that Basil Carlo was a young actor disfigured in a car accident who, in a desperate attempt to salvage his career, began using an industrial chemical known as Renew, which, when combined with clay and putty, warps flesh into new shapes and forms. Not only do I think this is probably going to be Hagen's backstory in the film, with the movie adapting elements of both Hagen and Carlo's origins, but I mean, am I crazy in thinking that this reminds me a lot of The Substance, which through both its grotesque body horror and commentary on the corrupting allure of fame and Hollywood superstardom is probably the closest comparison we have to what to expect from Clayface. The other comic worth mentioning is Clayface One Bad Day. Tom Rees-Harris recently shared an image on social media featuring this series, so that it might have in some way influenced his portrayal of the character. Released in 2023, the comic follows Basil Carlo as he attempts to rebuild his life and acting career, tormented by his past as Clayface and seeking a second chance. It presents Clayface as a sympathetic figure, ultimately unable to escape the shadow of the monster he's become. Batman does play a minor role, but it's mostly a character study of Clayface's misfortunes and the struggles to escape the world's expectation that he can be anything other than a monster. Although I expect some elements from each of these stories to find their way into the film, it's also fair to say Clayface is taking a lot of cues from both classic and recent horror projects. As I noted previously, there are major parallels to 2024's The Substance, especially if it adapts Hagen's acting background and addiction to an experimental drug aimed to cure his disfigurement. The Substance is one of the best films of the decade, hands down, and its cautionary tale on superstardom and how it destroys people feels right at home with a Clayface character. In a way, you could make a Clayface film that's basically a version of The Substance targeted at young men, discussing ideas of body image, insecurities, and how social media both reinforces and targets people's understanding of masculinity to sell products and perpetuate a vicious cycle. The Substance handled this brilliantly regarding unrealistic body standards for women, especially as they age, and the idea of not being desirable, hireable when you hit a certain age, and how Hollywood in particular preys on and intensifies these anxieties. As a companion piece though, perhaps Clayface could lean into that as well. The fact that it's a film about an attractive, promising actor who is disfigured and transformed into a monster feels like the perfect setting to explore how the media preys on young men's vulnerabilities and insecurities. There's also something American Psycho-esque about this idea that men are being conditioned by social media, Hollywood, what have you, the manosphere, if you will, to believe they need to achieve these ever-increasing standards of beauty. And that if you can't be perfect, chiseled, and jacked, shredded beyond belief, the body of a Greek god, you're worthless and a freak and should probably be taking more steroids or some sort of substance. Perhaps Matt Hagen is someone whose identity is intertwined with his good looks. His pursuits of fame has caused him to have little else but a charming smile and rock hard abs. So when that is all taken away, what is he? I know we're talking about a comic book movie here and a Batman villain at that, but still, there's potential to tell a really insightful and profound story here about the impact of body dysmorphia on a generation of men. I mean, literally, don't even get me started on whatever the fuck look-maxing is. Look-maxing. I can't even fucking say it because it's a stupid word. It shouldn't exist. And yeah, people mogging at the camera. That's a new one there, right? I'm a fucking idiot. Anyways, and how the endless pursuits of unreachable beauty standards can destroy people's self-worth and relationship with their body. If you want to get really deep into it, and this is probably me, reading entirely too much on a 1-minute teaser and just the idea of Clayface and just kind of putting all these things together, but there's even space to discuss ideas of the manosphere, the rise of extreme over-the-top masculine influencers, and the whole gender war being waged by them against women. It's all about the feeling of inadequacy. They feel like it's everyone else putting these external pressures onto them, but really, it's being perpetuated from within. It's not the outside world making you a monster. Maybe you already are one deep inside. This is also true for Matt Hagen being an actor. Hollywood has become obsessed with the male body. Actors are forced to get into increasingly better shape, often fueled by PEDs and extreme dieting, as well as the ever-growing trend of celebrities relying on plastic surgery, Botox, and Ozempic to obtain that perfect appearance. If you want to be famous today, you have to look a certain way, so actors are forced to abuse and push their bodies to the extreme in the pursuit of fame and stardom. Let me actually clarify. If you want to be a leading man today, if you want to be Chris Evans or Chris Hemsworth, we'll just say that, this is what you have to do. And it looks like Matt Hagen, based on the 1 minute we've seen here, isn't really interested in being a Willem Dafoe-esque character actor, but, maybe he should consider that because Willem Dafoe's a working actor and he continues to crush it. Considering how prevalent extreme body transformations are in superhero movies, Clayface could even be an allegory for that, literally critiquing the very genre it spawned from and commenting on how that relentless drive to shape and push your body can cause serious problems in the long run. There's also an additional element to Clayface's backstory too. I think about the Feet of Clay episode and how Hagen's procedure allows him to inhabit characters that he wasn't able to beforehand. He can literally mold his appearance to fit the role, meaning he's perfect for any role. But the continued use of it only further removes him from who he is. He becomes dependent on it, and this addiction is weaponized by Daggert until it quite literally consumes him and he becomes Clayface. Likewise, I think Hagen being an actor is an interesting premise for tackling themes of identity. Much like how Clayface can transform into other people in the comics, Hagen's life is defined by him becoming other people, losing himself in roles and being defined by his ability to not be himself. But when that career is taken away, who is Matt Hagen beyond the characters he plays? I keep thinking about the final shot where he wipes his face off. It's so grotesque, it's so visceral. It is an image that's sticking with me, and I think that's a good sign for the impact this film is going to have on me. Not only is that a brilliant moment that demonstrates the exact type of body horror I want from this film, but it's, coupled with Hagen's emotionless Patrick Bateman-like stare beforehand, makes me feel like he's almost afraid of himself, hating himself and trying to hide away. Without his looks and his career, he is no one. In his own mind, he's already a monster. I know I've brought up The Substance several times here, and for good reason, but it isn't the only film this trailer reminded me of. Obviously, David Cronenberg's The Fly is likely a key influence, particularly in its focus on experimentation. Gone wrong if Hagen is forced into his transformation, the body horror elements, the visceral body horror elements, and there are shots in this teaser that feel heavily influenced by Eyes Without a Face. The scenes of Hagen in bandages feel like an intentional callback to Edna's appearances after being experimented on by the Doctor. Also, I mean, let's just be real here for a second. Is it just me, or does the teaser and the plot synopsis remind you of Sam Raimi's Darkman. Forever the blueprint of the comic book genre, our Lord and Savior Sam Raimi. Given Raimi's legacy in both superhero and horror genres, it isn't too surprising, but the images of Hagen's bloodstained bandages and the potential revenge quest against the mob for causing his transformation, a la Feet of Clay, did remind me of Darkman a little. However, while all those comics and films might have shaped how Watkins, Flanagan, and DC approached Clayface, this movie also feels very distinct and original, especially when compared to other recent superhero projects. At a time when big budget films in general are becoming increasingly homogeneous, and studios are more cautious than ever when it comes to major IPs, the fact that Clayface looks and feels like a straight up horror flick, more at home with Blumhouse than with the Justice League, actually reminding me a lot of what Blumhouse is trying to do with their classic Universal monster reimaginings or whatever, isn't just a testament to how unapologetic Watkins and Flanagan have been in their vision, but it perfectly demonstrates the entire ethos of the new DCU to be a place for unique, creator-driven projects that take the DC heroes and villains into interesting new directions. This is everything that I've been excited about from the DCU. This is what I want all cinematic universes to kind of like pull from, to just do shit that's cool and interesting and let auteurs like come in and like make cool little things like Clayface, and like it can be a part of your universe, but I don't know, it just helps make the world feel lived in and diverse. The fact that this doesn't immediately fit alongside something like Superman or Lanterns is kind of cool, and a much more interesting approach to an interconnected universe than everything looking and feeling the same. In a way, it reminds me more of how a comic book universe is structured, where characters like Superman and Batman comfortably exist alongside supernatural beings like Swamp Thing and Constantine. This interconnectivity doesn't sacrifice each hero's individual tone, but it means, when brought together, a wider range of stories can be told under the DC umbrella. Obviously, film is a different medium from comics. However, there's a proven track record of, 80 plus years of evidence that can still have an expansive shared universe and tell distinct stories across a variety of genres without one ultimately sacrificing the other. It's why I'm so fucking excited for Clayface in ways I wasn't for Sony's attempts at spinning off their Spider-Man rogues. You could have made an interesting film about Kraven, Venom, and Morbius. Well, maybe not Morbius per se, but the studio took the most generic, lazy approach and didn't hire qualified directors with unique visions who could bring these characters to life in interesting ways. It was simply an exercise in maintaining the Spider-Man IP and trying to milk it for everything that it was worth. I mean, they were just shameless ploys at trying to exploit the goodwill of Spider-Man fans. Hell, speaking of Spider-Man, I recently talked about this problem in my Spider Noir video, which you should go check out. That show looks weird in the best way possible, and it's a great example of a studio taking risks with their IP and doing something genuinely different. Clayface has the potential to do that for DC, not taking away from their mainstream superhero outputs, but highlighting the innate variety that this universe has to offer, and the abundance of tonally and stylistically diverse tales you can tell with its characters. I made a video last year, or maybe a couple years ago, I can't even remember, I feel like it's been an eternity, about the idea of Clayface appearing in Matt Reeves' The Batman Part 2, and why that would be perfect. He'd be the perfect villain for the Batman Part 2, and how the character's themes of identity and duality would be a great parallel to Pattinson's Bruce Wayne. While I do stand by that, and I think I would have liked to have seen this Clayface interact with a Pattinson Batman, I mean, it's not gonna make or break the film for me, it just would have been a cool thing to have. And ultimately, I also think there is an interesting story to tell about Clayface on his own. The tragic tale of a promising Hollywood star with the stereotypical good looks, who has his dreams and ambitions stolen from him in an instant, be it via an accident or something involving the mob or whatever, and is forced to reassess who he is when he no longer recognizes himself in the mirror. If the movie is a revenge story of Hagen seeking retribution against those who caused his condition, that's a compelling story in its own regard, especially when you factor in the social commentary on fame, addiction, and masculinity that all lends itself to this character. Hagen could be either a sympathetic anti-hero or a straight-up villain, whichever way they choose. I think there's a lot of interesting directions to take this character, and it could result in one of the most distinct superhero films in years either way. I definitely would prefer if it was a tragedy of a villain in the making. I mean, that just seems more interesting, but I mean, you know, true to the spirit of the character, I guess Clayface is moldable is what I was gonna say, but it's malleable, whatever. And this is all why I've been saying Clayface is my most anticipated comic book movie of the year. Out of all the upcoming films from DC and Marvel, this feels like the most unpredictable and unique. And I love the fact that Gunn is so committed to bringing variety to the DC universe, and the extent to which James Watkins and everyone involved have been allowed to present Clayface as a true, unashamed horror film. Will it live up to its potential? I mean, who knows? We've seen a lot of bad horror films. Being a horror film doesn't immediately mean that you're, you know, gonna be good. But ultimately, I'm at least glad that they're taking risks and doing something different. That's what really matters. Because if it pays off, this has the potential to be an awesome film and a real breath of fresh air in a superhero landscape that desperately needs new ideas and unconventional approaches to telling these types of stories. It could usher in a new wave of interesting auteur-driven films like this. Maybe not villain movies all the time, but just like very intensely focused character pieces. I think Clayface is going to be a massive test for the entire direction of the DCU and its focus on creator-driven stories, and at least judging off this first teaser, it will absolutely cement the studio's vision for this universe as something fresh, exciting, inspiring, and just fucking awesome. I think this thing's gonna rule, guys. This is gonna be a special film. So stoked.